Hi everyone, my name's Rebecca. I'm a PhD student, therefore I guess I'm an ichthyologist studying the evolution of morphology in Loricariids, which is plecos. And for today's video I'm going to talk about really why Loricariids, plecs hide so much and why we don't see them so frequently. And a lot of people really struggle with that because they are or can be expensive fish. They can be very ornate and they aren't always out as much as we like to. This tank only has 3 in, and at the moment I can only see, well, 1 from this position, so the tail of the big female, and then the sort of edge of the head of the larger male of the barbs, cichlids, the mango or magnum pleco. And it's totally normal for Loricariids to hide. You'll have tanks of them, even sort of colonies where they're breeding, and of a wide diversity of different species, and you might never see them. They are generally very reclusive, and this is largely in regards to the subfamily known as Hypopotominae. Hypopotominae contains a lot of the species and members we see in the trade and in the hobby that are more popular. So, and these are the ones that often reach the higher price brackets, and they are reclusive fishes. If we look at them in the wild, they'll be hiding in crevices, under rocks, under wood, in wood, in sort of the crevices of rocks, sort of amongst things. They're not going to be that much in the open, and it's where they feel safe. Naturally in the wild they will move around between those, and they will feed maybe on an open surface. It really depends on the species. So some species are more going to be found in crevices, whereas some might be feeding on a surface like these barbs, cichlids. You'll see plenty of videos of them in the wild or photos where they're feeding over a flat surface, but they will also go and hide to a crevice, and that's totally normal. And any big movement around the tank, even if they're used to it, will still replicate a predator. Most of these fishes are still wild caught, and that sort of ominous movement could mean anything. Dither fish could potentially help, but where they might not be found around these type of dither fish, they might not understand how these dither fish communicate, and it might send mixed sorts of messages. So especially if it comes to adding, say, guppies, or even tetras from different areas. The Rio Zingu, for example, and I use this as a really good example because so many of our fishes are found there, you don't really see so many smaller tetra there. Yes, there's the lemon tetra, Hypopotominae, I think it is, Hypopotominae, I'm not sure the species name. But they're used to more leporinos, which are very boisterous. They're going to nick the food, they're going to sort of, they're a lot more, very different behaviour, but they're also used to the sort of silverdoras, which I think is myotinus, and they have very different behaviour to tetras, to live bearers, and it's probably important to look at that and recognise that dither fish might not help, and they probably won't make as much of a difference to fish coming out. If you spend a lot of time around the tank though, you're more likely to see these behaviours as they come out when they think, oh, there's no one around, and you're probably just sat there sort of doing other things. So that's why I have them here, and this is where I work in a way. Or if I'm doing stuff, I'll sit around and then I see interesting behaviour because I'm just there. And I think it's important to recognise that if the fish is shy and reclusive, if it's out in the open and not moving when you walk past, maybe there's something wrong. So letting those natural behaviours develop could give good indicators anyway. I don't mean just scaring the fish around, but it's totally normal for these fishes to hide. They do so in the wild, and they will do in captivity, whether they've been captive bred for generations or not. Even captive bred species of other animals we look at still display very natural behaviours, especially when it comes to potential predators. Look at rabbits and guinea pigs, hamsters, and how they aren't keen on being picked up. They're not keen on someone coming from above, and that many of those have been captive breds, guinea pigs for hundreds of years, rabbits as well. So these natural behaviours are just totally normal, and we shouldn't just disregard them because we don't like them. and just letting these fishes have hiding places. What can we do about giving these fishes reclusive places? That, like, I always think piling up bogwood, piling up stones is always a brilliant way to give them places to hide, nip in and out, and also break up territories. Even if you have only one, it will allow them just somewhere to hide and choices. And it's quite interesting to see how they interact with the different caves. So this tank has larger caves. I need more bogwood in there. All of these fishes would largely be found more around stones in the wild, but wood, stones, doesn't make much of a difference between the two. I just don't trust stones if they're going to fall. But I've got larger caves, I've got tunnels, because if one gets trapped, it could get seriously hurt, especially by this big female. And piling up wood just creates so many more crevices. It's not so much about allowing the fishes or forcing the fishes out, it's giving them places to hide, and then they might almost feel like if they could be out slightly, they've got somewhere else to go. And I think it looks a lot better, really, when you see the fish forced to be exposed. It just doesn't look right, doesn't look as natural. And in my other tank, I've got many different shapes and sizes of caves, because I've got a few different species and also different genera, and where there's different ages, sizes, it gives them more options. But definitely just provide those crevices even if you might not see them. But there are alternatives, because all I'm emphasising it is a natural behaviour. These fishes are more likely to hide. There are alternatives when it comes to Loricariidae and more out of Hypopotominae. Some Hypopotominae are a lot more confident, I find. Scorpion and cichlids seems to be leprocanthus. But I guess they're just the more boisterous ones. And it does depend on individuals and also what they're doing. If they're breeding, you're not really going to see the male so much, and you're going to have periods where you're not going to see the female. But it's good to almost have a check-up on your fish, and you can see she's out there at the moment. She's not too bothered, but she will spook quite easily, and I think that's quite normal with a lot of fishes that are more reclusive, and it's totally fine. Like discus, they will spook for no reason whatsoever. And just giving them those places they can retreat to is just part of their enrichment. But there are alternatives that aren't so reclusive outside Hypopotominae, because Hypopotominae tends to be that more reclusive group of species, group of genera. So outside of Hypopotominae, I think the best is probably Hypopotominae. These are more dwarf species or dwarf genera in comparison to Hypopotominae. They're evolved for more, they're sort of miniaturized, which does make them available for a wider range of tanks. But the most famous notable members is probably the genus Otocinclus, and them being shoaling gives them a lot more confidence. And I find it sort of, they are more likely to be in the open, and especially when they've got company, they feel a lot more confident in groups. Also not having those large sort of ominous fishes probably would help, especially with these smaller species. But also others, you've got Hypopotominae. I believe there's a Hypopotominae robocop, also Peru. Has it been described? I don't think that one has. You've also got Otocinclus, Epile, and a few others, which might now be Rhino Otocinclus. Very ornate, very small, but they're still very beautiful. Hypopotominae tends to be bigger, but they are a lot more confident, I find, and less bothered by that ominous large shape moving outside of the tank. It does help if you aren't putting the tanks in an active spot where people are moving, dashing past, because that's obviously going to say that there's a lot of things moving past in the wild. That could be a predator. They're not going to suddenly switch off to that risk of predation, because that's always going to be on their mind. So in general, I would always just let them be and sit around the tank, be sort of quiet, mindful, and then you're going to see those fishes there and their interesting behaviour. Some are a bit more reclusive, maybe Panacus, AF Macus and other Panacus, but that's just by their nature. Like I'd say Hyponcistrus zebra, although Panacus, these ones will live in the sort of crevices of wood. They are gnawing into it. They're going to be reclusive. You're not going to see them as much because that's where they're feeding. That's where they're hiding. That is their lifestyle. Hyponcistrus, I'd say I'd not see much of them even in the wild. I guess going out into the open. And that's because their food source isn't in the open, it's in the rocks, in the crevices of the rocks and around there. So that's where they're feeding. They're not going to want to go up onto surface, especially if there's that big moving sort of shapes. And also maybe if you want to see interesting behaviour, go for fishes that are found where your fish comes from rather than fishes that don't, because then they have some innate understanding of what that fish actually is like communicating, whether like, because tetra obviously show very different to live bearers, but also individual species that understand that behaviour a lot better, whether the fish is spooked, whether the fish is calm. And I think tetra adapt quite well to people being outside the tank, but they still really do shoal. So anyway, thank you for watching, and if you've got any questions, put in the comments, or I've got the Facebook groups to ask. Thank you for watching. If you like my videos, please subscribe, please like, comment, whatever, and thank you for watching.